Alleluia, 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 Alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus went to the district of Tyre. He entered a house and wanted no one to know about it, but he could not escape notice. Soon a woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied and said to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's scraps." Then he said to her, "For saying this, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter." When the woman went home, she found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. The Gospel of the Lord. When I was in seminary, I was able to do, 2 of my summers, I was able to do a summer camp. And one summer I was at a summer camp up in Wisconsin. And one of the camp members, he asked me, he said, "Do you know where the word woman comes from?" And I said, "No." And he said, "When Adam was in the garden, he said, 'Whoa, man.'" We saw Eve, right? That's where the word woman comes from. Actually, it comes from Old English. Combining the words wife and man is where we get the English word woman. In Hebrew, the word for woman is isha, and the word for man is ish. Right? So just as Adam came from Adamah, so likewise isha comes from ish. The very name for woman represents where she has come from. She has come from the side of her husband. Something that I think is important to notice when we read this chapter is how it's counterintuitive to many ancient myths in the ancient world. Many cultures believe that women were inferior to men. And here in this book of Genesis, we see that woman is equal, right, in dignity to man. We see that she is not taken from his feet, but rather from his side, representing equality. Likewise, she is called a helpmate or a partner for the man. Again, in our English language, some of those translations, they kind of skew the word's meaning, but the Hebrew word is etzer. Etzer is used elsewhere in the Old Testament to describe God and his relationship to Israel. That God is a helpmate to the people of Israel. He is a partner. Usually it's used in terms of like a military battle. When the Israelites are going into battle, they say that God is their etzer. Right? He's like their strength. Right? And so the woman is anything but inferior in this passage. Rather, she gives strength to the man. Right? So we should keep that in mind. Lastly, these last lines here, the man and his wife were both naked, and yet they felt no shame. Right? This gives us an insight into what it was like to live in the human condition before the fall of man. Before the fall of Adam and Eve, they experienced what the church calls 4 harmonies. They experienced harmony with God. They walked with him and talked with him as if he were a friend. They experienced harmony with creation. We see that all the animals are subject to Adam and Eve here. Right? There is no fear of being attacked or anything like that in the garden. Likewise, they experience harmony within themselves. They don't yet have the struggle against their sinfulness and selfishness. And finally, they experience harmony between each other. Right? The husband and wife experience harmony. The Catechism points this out to show that in our current human condition, we have lost these harmonies. We no longer have the harmony with God. When we try to pray, it seems like there is a great distance between us and God. He seems distant from us. We don't experience harmony with creation. We have to battle against our own mortality, especially as we get older. We recognize that our bodies are fighting against us. It's a disharmony with creation. We experience the struggle with sin that St. Paul describes. He says, I do what I do not wish to do. His sinfulness is constantly trying to dominate him. And finally, we experience disharmony between each other. Those of you who are married know that despite how much you might love your spouse, right, there are regularly times where you can feel a great distance between you, a great separation. I think another great way to think about this is many of us experience loneliness, even when we're in the midst of a great crowd of people. Like, for example, you might be in an airport or a party, and you might just feel completely isolated, completely alone, anxious. Those are the effects of sin. That is the loss of these harmonies that we experienced in the beginning. And so Genesis is pointing out to us the great harmony they experienced at first. And as we will see, as a consequence of the fall, those harmonies are lost. We still experience those disharmonies today. Thanks be to God, because Christ has come and he has begun to redeem the human race. Some of those disharmonies might be healed within us through the power of grace and the sacraments and the life of holiness.